When I was a student at Wofford College, I was in the men's glee club, and I sat next to this guy who was just the nicest guy, likable, popular on campus, a member of a prominent fraternity. And he met this girl, and he was head over heels in love with that girl for about a week. And I'm telling you, she was cute and shy and genteel and kind-hearted and a bit of a poet. And he loved all those things about her, or so he said, until he took her to a fraternity party where she was very ill at ease, and where his fraternity brothers kept coming up and saying things like, "Why are you with her, man? She's so dull. Hey, man, you can do better than that. She doesn't fit in with us, dude." And so by the end of the weekend, he decided she wasn't right for him at all. He let the influence of a bunch of knucklehead fraternity boys sway his opinion of a precious girl. Now, I knew another guy on the north side of Tallahassee a few years ago who was very opposed to Donald Trump. Told me he couldn't stand the guy. He's so full of himself. He isn't a true patriot. He isn't a gentleman. He's got a foul mouth. I would never vote for him. A month later, I met him for lunch. He had a Trump sticker on the back of his car. I said, "Oh my gosh, what happened?" And he hemmed and hawed back and forth. What it came down to is his friends convinced him if he wanted his business to last, he better vote for that guy. And so he did. We can be so fickle, can't we? We're for you one moment and against you the next. Fair weather friends. You ever had any of those? Oh, I've had a bundle of those. They're with you for as long as it works for them, as long as things are going the way they want them to go, but if they decide that hanging out with you diminishes their own sense of importance, cramps their style in any way, then you're done, buddy. My father used to say about politicians that 99.9% of them put their finger in the mouth, hold it in the air, and see which way the wind's blowing, and that's the way they go. Fickle, undependable, easily persuaded. It's the nature of humanity, is it not? We see it in social media trends and investment bubbles and TikTok influencers. We are so easily pulled into a herd mentality, mob rule, group think. In this morning's gospel lesson, Jesus enters Jerusalem for the last time in triumph. People turning out in celebration. Hail Jesus! Hosanna in the highest! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord! Filled with adulation and celebration for about 4 days. And then they started saying, "Crucify." Now, scholars disagree about this business of fickle followers. Some say it was a completely different group of people from the one standing there saying Hosanna in the highest. Completely different, that group that called for crucifixion. Well, they can't know that. There's nothing in Scripture that tells us that. And then there are others who say that there's no doubt that every one of those doggone worthless followers were turning against him in just a few days' time. Well, they can't know that either. Scripture doesn't tell us that. But what I think we can know is that based on human nature, it is safe to assume that some, and perhaps many, of the very ones who welcomed him turned against him. I mean, we do know that by the time the crucifixion took place, nobody standing with him except Mary and that little young disciple called John. Everybody else has turned their backs. But how does a person move from "Hail Jesus" to "Crucify him" in such a brief period of time? Well, let's look at what happened. Jesus specifically sent the disciples to get a donkey for him to ride into Jerusalem. This was true to the prophecy of Zechariah chapter 9, which says, "A king will come to Israel riding on a donkey." We studied this in Sunday school this morning. And while it is true that this prophecy of Zechariah said that a king would come on a donkey, humble, seeking peace, that's not the larger picture of what is in chapter 9. There's a lot of killing, a lot of military activity on either side of that. That picture of an humble king was not what most Jews were expecting. And I'm sure that there were many standing there with the palms in their hands, not thrilled to see Jesus on a donkey. They had come there because they believed that maybe this guy was really, truly the Messiah. He's out there doing miraculous stuff. He's saying all kinds of remarkable things. And I don't know, maybe he's the guy. And you know what had happened for Passover. It's what happened every year. All these poor people from every region of Israel had walked long distances to get into the city for the celebration of Passover. And so you got all these poor people there. Perfect moment, right? They're poor, they're struggling, they're under the domination of this hateful group of pagan armies. And they're ready to be done with that. They've been hoping and praying for that forever. And this Jesus guy, he's been teaching for 3 years. I think he's the one. And now, here he's coming. He's coming into the city of Jerusalem. We've been told to be here, to be ready to welcome him. And we think he's going to be the one that raises the sword. And we're all going to jump in there together. And we're going to push these doggone Romans out of the city of David once and for all. That's what they hoped. But then here comes Jesus, slowly ambling down the dirt road on a donkey. Not a powerful stallion ready for war, but on this stumbling little donkey, as though Jesus were coming in as a servant to wash feet. Perhaps some began to turn against him in that moment, seeing him as an imposter, a fraud, an embarrassment. And you know what happened once Jesus arrived in the city? What did he do? Well, he made his way right away to the temple. And we have that scene that we all know so well, turning over those tables. Angry. He was angry at who? He was angry at the leaders of Israel. He was angry with the Sadducees. He was angry with the Pharisees. He was angry with the priests of the temple. They all seemed like they were more concerned with their own power, with having money, with having domination. And they cared nothing about the poor who had walked so far for the sake of worshiping God. They cared nothing about Gentiles who had no ability now to worship in God's temple because they've been pushed out by the money changers. You remember Herod the Great? Not too long before Jesus had decided he was going to embellish the temple and make it more beautiful and to expand its bounds. And so he did that. And one thing he added was a whole courtyard for the Gentiles. You remember there was the priests, and then a courtyard for the men, and then a courtyard for the women, and then a courtyard put by Herod for Gentiles. So that God-fearers, they were called, Gentiles who'd heard about this Yahweh of Israel and who were curious, who were interested, so that they now could have a place where they could come in a courtyard right there at the back and hear the prayers offered to Yahweh. Get some sense of who this mighty God was. But not anymore. Oh, no more of that, because now you had the money changers in there. And why were they there? Well, the temple priest brought them there. For what purpose? Well, it was really very clever the way they worked this. They said you can't use secular money to buy animals for sacrifice, because that money's got Caesar's head on it, and he's a pagan, and we're not going to let you use that to go into the temple treasury. That's dirty, filthy stuff. We're not going to have that. So here's what you got to do. You've got to exchange your secular money for temple money. that has godly images on it. And then you can go down to that next set of tables down there, and you can use temple money to buy the pigeons and the turtle doves you need for sacrifice. But of course, it was a very high rate of exchange and a big high price for those pigeons and turtle doves. And it was all on the backs of the poor, because it's these poor people who had to walk for days to get here, who couldn't bring a turtle dove all that way on a dirt road. And so they had it available at the temple. A very convenient thing for the poor, right? They were doing a kind thing. Baloney. They were taking advantage of the poor in horrible ways. And on top of that, they had squeezed the Gentiles out. There was no place for them to come and stand and worship. And Jesus, I imagine, in a rather angry voice, says to them, "My Father's house was created as a place of prayer for all people." That's what it tells us in the Old Testament when Solomon was rebuilding the temple. Place of prayer for all people, not just for the Israelites. Well, as you can imagine, Jesus storming around, turning over those tables, stopping the sales, yelling at them that this is for all people, did not go over well among the priests or the Sadducees or the Pharisees, not at all. Who is this guy? He's a radical. He's a radical. You remember those radicals back from the 60s? Oh, he's worse than any of them. He's a radical out there saying crazy things. He's yelling at and complaining about not the Romans, not our enemies, but fellow Jews. In fact, the very priests of the temple. Okay, this guy has stepped out too far. He's lost it. He's yelling in the temple precincts about the temple leaders. We don't want to be too close to this guy. It's going to mess us up. It's going to hurt our business. It could hurt our way of life, the way of life for our families. We don't want any part of this. Well, you had him on a donkey. That's a disappointment. Then you got him yelling at the priest. That's scary. And what else do you have? Well, then guess what he did? He marched off in the middle of the night with the temple guard. He was turned over to Pilate without one moment of resistance. He just let him take him. Do you remember Peter, in the midst of the temple guard trying to take him, pulled out his sword. He had a sword on him, and he sliced the ear off of one of those guys. And Jesus turned to him and said, "Put the sword down. Those who live by the sword die by the sword." And he let him take him. That's not the Messiah of God. The Messiah of God doesn't let people, a temple guard, control him. The Messiah of God doesn't just give up. Doesn't just say, "Oh, I have no power, you can take me. Throw me on a cross like a common criminal." You've got to believe that at this moment, if the donkey hadn't done it for some of them, and the yelling at the priest hadn't done it for some of them, this business of letting the guards take him and put him on a Roman, well, that did it. This isn't the Messiah. What were we thinking? This is crazy. He's letting them take him. He's going to be killed like a common criminal. That's not Messiah. It's just some country guy trying to be something he's not. What does it take to move from "Hail Jesus" to "Crucify him"? Maybe it only takes feeling that this Jesus guy isn't doing anything to help me. Or maybe you think, following this guy makes me look like a wimp. Or following this guy can threaten my lifestyle, could hurt my business, my standing in the community, my popularity. Or maybe it just takes seeing that the powerful people are yelling, "Crucify him." So I better get in there with the powerful people because this Jesus guy is going down. I used to think that old hymn that we sometimes sing in Lent, that odd one, you know, the one that says, "Were you there when they crucified my Lord?" I used to think, of course I wasn't there. That was 2,000 years ago. What do you even mean, were you there? Well, maybe they mean that as a fellow member of the fallen humanity that crucified Jesus, that I was, in some sense, yes, there. Maybe they mean that vicariously, as I listen to the story being retold, I am, in a way, there. But maybe what they mean is that in all the moments of my own life, when because of fear or embarrassment or inconvenience or awkwardness or selfishness, I turn my back on Jesus, then I am as surely there as all those others who were one moment singing, "Hail Jesus," and the next moment saying, "Crucify." If it is true, as the scripture indicates, that Jesus on that cross took on the sins of the whole world from its beginning to its end, then the sins of my life were and are and always will be part of the weight of His suffering. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Yes, I was. And I am, as are all of us.